The Angel Down the Dark Alley. The Angel Down the Dark Alley. Stories from my life. Hello, you all. I'm Diana Brianne. Well, periodically, I like to share a story from my life. And it's just something I enjoy doing. This one's a little more serious, so, just kind of be prepared for it. It's called The Angel Down the Dark Alley. Well, when I was about 20 years old, I was living out in California in the beach area. And I had an apartment, and this is in the 70s. And because, I'm 62 years old and so I'm reflecting back on this. But back then, we didn't have electric garage door openers, at least in the apartment complex that I lived, but they had garage doors. And so we had to pull the garage door down with like a rope. And, it was a rope attached to the inside of the garage, and you pull it down, and it came down, and it would shut. So I was a young nurse. And so it was very common for us to go out in our white nurses' uniforms, because we still wore white nurses' uniforms and caps back then. That was before the changeover in kind of the nursing attire. And so we went, I usually worked the 3 to 11 shift. Back then they had 7 to 3, 3 to 11, and 11 to 7. I don't know if they still do that now or not, because it's been a long, long time since I've worked as a nurse. But anyhow, I was 20, and so 20 or 21. Okay, 20 or 21, but I was a brand new nurse. And so we all went out after the 3 to 11 shift, which we got off at 11:30, and then by the time we got to the disco, and I didn't drink or anything, so we went out, and probably about 1:30 in the morning, actually quite late. But you're young and having fun, and you don't think anything can ever happen and all that. So I came home. I was driving home, and my garage was down the dead end part of the alley, so you had to kind of go way in the back and then park. And so I, got out, lifted the garage door up, and I pulled in, turned my car off, got my purse, was in my nurse's uniform, and as I was pulling down the garage door with a rope, suddenly I felt myself thrust forcefully to the ground, and there was gravel on the ground, and all of a sudden I felt something sharp against my neck, and someone hitting my head and kind of grinding it into the gravel. And I knew I was in trouble, and I looked up, and there were 3 young adult men, and it was very, very scary, extremely scary for me. And I don't know what their intention was. I have no idea. I just know it wasn't good. And I remembered my grandmother always taught me to call on the name of Jesus. And I didn't say God, God, please help me. I said, Jesus, please help me. And within a moment, I heard this noise. And around the corner, this dead-end alley at 1:30 at night that no one goes down, comes this old roaring car. It was an old car. Came roaring down where I was. And the man got out, an old man got out and shook his stick. And those guys got up and ran. And I got myself up off the ground. And when I got myself up off the ground, because I wasn't sure if it was safe enough to do so, that man was gone. That old man was gone. The car was gone. And I took off running to my apartment. My uniform was ripped, but fortunately I was okay. I was all in one piece. I was okay. And I ran into my apartment, and of course we called the police and all that, made a report. And later, a couple weeks later, I heard some guy, I lived in an upstairs apartment, and I was awake in the middle of the night, and I heard some conversation outside my window. And I looked out, and it was those guys. They didn't know I lived in that apartment. They were out there canvassing the area, waiting for their next victim to come around the corner. So lo and behold, I called the police, and when the sirens came, they took off running, and I took off. I was in my nightgown, and the balcony's all connected, so I was running down the balcony, chasing them. I can't believe I had the nerve to chase them, but I think I was so mad at what they tried to do to me, and probably what they were trying to do to someone else. And so when the police came, these guys had actually ran into an apartment. They were actually living there in someone else's apartment. And so I can't remember that far back, but I had to go identify everything, and it was a process. And nothing really ever happened to those guys. Somehow they got off, and they took off, and I don't even know if they were ever really found after that, because they were not arrested that particular night, because the incident that happened to me had not happened that night. It had happened a couple weeks before. And this is back in the 70s, and things were very different back then. And but I remember I moved out of that apartment. I moved out of that apartment shortly thereafter, because I could not sleep, and I was pretty traumatized. If anyone approached me too quickly, or I heard a loud noise, I would just kind of jump back. And for about 2 years, kind of a PTSD type of thing. And so, but I was okay. And I learned a valuable lesson not to go down dark alleys or go where I do not belong, especially at late night or times of the day that I should not be. And so I'm very, very guarded about the places I go. And I think before I go someplace, I don't go isolated places. Not at all. And so it really made me very alert going forward in my life, which is probably a very, very good thing. But I always think that man in that old smoking car that came down that alley at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning was an angel. I really do believe that. I really believe when I called on the name of Jesus, and that car came around the corner. It couldn't have been at a more perfect time. And like I said, nobody came down that alley anyhow, especially at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I was very grateful. So that's a story from my life, and I thought I would share it with you. I like to share my little stories. Some of them are funny. I have a lot of funny ones too, okay? From my house to yours, please subscribe to my YouTube page here, and I hope to talk to you soon.